Most people think chemistry feels exciting, immediate, electric, like a spark, like intensity, like you finally found someone who gets you. But sometimes that spark is not connection, it's recognition. Your nervous system recognizing a familiar emotional pattern. That's the uncomfortable part nobody talks about enough. Some people are not attracted to what's healthy. They're attracted to what feels emotionally familiar, and familiarity is not the same thing as safety. That distinction changes entire relationships because the brain does not prioritize what is good for you first. It prioritizes what it already understands. So, if someone grew up earning love, managing tension, walking on eggshells, trying to stabilize emotionally unpredictable people, their nervous system may unconsciously associate anxiety with connection, not because they're broken, because adaptation became familiarity, and familiarity became attraction. That's why some people repeatedly end up in relationships that emotionally exhaust them while still feeling intensely attached. They are not consciously choosing pain, they are subconsciously choosing a pattern they already know how to survive. That's very different, which is why recognizing toxic patterns is not just about analyzing the other person. It's about learning to observe your own internal reactions around them, because toxic dynamics often reveal themselves quietly at first. One of the biggest signs is the velocity of closeness. The relationship starts moving unusually fast. Deep vulnerability immediately, soulmate language immediately. Emotional intensity before actual emotional safety has been established. And honestly, that level of instant closeness can feel intoxicating when someone is emotionally hungry for connection. But fast intimacy is not always real intimacy. Sometimes it's emotional acceleration designed to bypass discernment. Healthy relationships usually unfold slowly. Toxic dynamics often escalate quickly. That difference matters. Another major pattern is inconsistency. They are intensely present, then suddenly emotionally absent, then intensely present again, then distant again, and that inconsistency creates something incredibly addictive psychologically. Intermittent reinforcement, one of the strongest bonding mechanisms in human behavior. It's why people stay at slot machines for hours. They aren't playing because they're winning. They're playing because they might win. Toxic relationships work the same way. You stay for the maybe, not the is. And over time, the brain starts attaching relief to the return of attention, which is why toxic relationships can become psychologically obsessive even when they are emotionally painful. The person is not just attached to the relationship anymore. They are attached to the relief that occasionally interrupts the anxiety. That cycle traps people for years. And another quiet red flag, you slowly start becoming emotionally responsible for the other person's internal state. You monitor their mood, adjust your tone carefully, overthink small disagreements. Apologize for things you didn't actually do, not because you're irrational, because your nervous system is trying to maintain emotional stability inside the relationship. That's when people start walking on eggshells without even realizing it. And honestly, one of the clearest ways to tell whether you are inside a healthy connection or a toxic pattern is not excitement, it's nervous system response. Healthy attraction often feels calmer than people expect. Not boring emotionally, breathable, grounded, and like your body is not constantly preparing for emotional impact. Toxic attraction often feels more electric, more obsessive, more consuming. But underneath that intensity is usually uncertainty, not safety. That's why butterflies are not always romance. Sometimes they are tremors, the body responding to unpredictability. And one of the most important questions a person can ask themselves early in dating is this: do I feel safe enough to say no to this person? Not later. Now. Because healthy love is not a hostage situation. If you cannot say no without fearing emotional fallout, you are not in a partnership. You are in a negotiation for your own safety. That question reveals a lot very quickly. And honestly, one of the hardest parts of healing toxic relationship patterns is that healthy people often feel strangely unfamiliar at first, sometimes even boring. Not because healthy love lacks depth, because your nervous system is no longer being flooded with chaos, unpredictability, and emotional survival chemistry. There are no dramatic highs and lows to confuse with passion, no constant guessing, no emotional whiplash, just consistency, calm, stability. If you're used to the emotional emergency room, a healthy relationship can initially feel like a quiet room. It's not boring, it's regulated. But to a nervous system used to chaos, regulation can feel like nothing. That's why healing often requires slowing down. not speeding up, giving yourself enough time to actually observe the person instead of becoming consumed by the emotional atmosphere they create. Do their words match their behavior? Can conflict happen without emotional punishment? Can you maintain your identity around them? Can you disagree without fearing abandonment? Those questions matter far more than immediate chemistry. Because the strongest protection against toxic dynamics is self possession, having an identity that exists outside the relationship, a life that does not emotionally collapse every time someone enters or leaves it. Toxic people often attach most easily to people searching for completion, but they struggle much more with people who already feel psychologically anchored within themselves. That's why the goal is not becoming emotionally closed off, or suspicious, or hyper independent. The goal is becoming emotionally aware enough to recognize when anxiety is disguising itself as attraction, because many people do not actually find toxic relationships. They tolerate them because the emotional environment feels familiar. Change what feels familiar, and eventually you change what feels attractive too. The goal isn't to find someone who gives you butterflies, it's to find someone who lets you breathe. What's one spark you used to think was chemistry, but now realize it was actually a red flag? I'll be reading through these. Seeing these patterns is the first step to breaking them.